There is no wind on the plateau. That was the first thing I noticed when I arrived in Drell's Hollow. Not the heat, not the silence, but the stillness of the air. The village sits at the foot of a dead mountain, its old stone homes huddled close like they're hiding something behind their backs. The locals didn't greet me when I passed, just turned away, slowly, as if even their eyes had weight. The house left to me by my late grandfather was smaller than I remembered, though I hadn't seen it since I was 6. He'd been a miner once, like most men here, back when the hollow still had veins of salt worth pulling from the earth. Now it's just dust, salt-crusted ruins and strange silences. I didn't return for sentiment. I came because the lawyer said the deed included the ancestral plot behind the house, and in my life in the city, I had nothing but debts. It felt like a gift, a way to begin again. But even then, something in me whispered too late. On the first night, I found the salt line, a ring unbroken, poured thick around the foundation of the house. Not the kind you use for pests or ice. This was old, ritual. I stepped over it without thinking. It didn't stop me, but I felt something, like passing through a curtain of cold breath. Inside, the house was silent, except for the faint ticking of an unseen clock. I didn't sleep that night. The walls creaked in slow, deliberate intervals. Sometimes I heard soft scratching beneath the floor, measured and steady, like nails dragging across stone. I told myself it was vermin, settling, my mind playing tricks. But at dawn, the salt line was broken. A small gap, no more than a hand's width, like something had stepped through. The next day, I asked around the village. Few answered. One old woman spat on the ground when I told her my family name. Another warned me not to stay past the 7th sunset. I asked why. "You can't keep what was promised," she said, "and what your blood promised belongs below." That night, I searched the cellar. I found nothing but shelves of old canning jars filled with salt water and a trapdoor I'd never seen before, bolted shut, wrapped in rusted iron chain, marked with a symbol, a spiral, flanked by 3 downward arrows. It was bleeding salt. Not leaking, bleeding. The 4th night, I began to hear voices. Not in my head, in the walls, in the pipes, in the drains. They didn't speak words, but they made shapes, thoughts, warnings, pleas, and questions. Always questions, as if something beneath the floor had only just remembered how to ask. Where is the keeper? Why was the gate unsealed? Are you the offering? By the 5th night, I started to understand. There had never been a mine. There had been a pit. My grandfather hadn't extracted salt. He had fed it, not for wealth, not for greed, but because it was the only thing that held the thing below. Every generation, one descendant stayed behind to maintain the seal, to offer flesh. But my grandfather had died alone. No offering had been given. The thing in the pit had gone unfed. On the 6th night, the trapdoor began to thump. It came with rhythm, patience. I bolted it again, tied it with rope, stacked furniture on top, anything to hold it down. But I could feel its hunger pressing upward through the floorboards, drawn by my blood. My presence was enough. I was enough. I packed to leave that night. I tried to drive, but the engine sputtered. The road was gone. Not broken, gone. Where the narrow dirt trail had been was only salt, dry and stretching in every direction, like the sea had receded but forgotten its shoreline. On the 7th night, the knocking stopped. The silence returned. I thought I had been spared, until the bells rang. There is no church in Drell's Hollow, not anymore, but the bells rang, low and hollow from beneath the earth. One for every hour until midnight. Each toll made the house colder. The walls sweated salt. The trapdoor swelled and split. At midnight, it opened. I didn't see what climbed out. I don't think I could have. The mind recoils from shapes that don't obey geometry, and eyes that turn without faces. It wasn't darkness. It wasn't light. It was a memory of something we were never meant to meet, and it had my grandfather's voice. It didn't attack me. It didn't speak. It only stepped forward, dripping salt from limbs that bent the wrong way, and placed its hand on my chest. I felt every name in my bloodline scream. I woke the next morning in the chair by the door. The salt ring was restored, the trapdoor sealed, the pit silent. The house is mine now. My grandfather's voice is gone, but I hear him in the walls sometimes, ticking, waiting, like a clock winding down. I think I understand. The seal holds, but I see cracks no one else can. Salt can't stop what's already tasted blood. I was born into the debt. I'll die inside the promise. When I was a boy, my grandmother used to warn me about the harvest moon. Not the kind of warning that comes from mere superstition. No, hers felt older, heavier, as if spoken in a language lost to time. She said the harvest moon wasn't just light spilling across the fields. It was a watcher, something ancient, bound to cycles older than any living memory. It kept promises made in blood and shadow, and it collected debts patiently, inevitably. I thought it was a story meant to keep children indoors, a way to make sure we didn't wander far at night. I was wrong. Years later, after my father died, I returned to the village, the place where I was born but barely remembered. I found it changed in ways I couldn't have imagined. The streets were empty, silent except for the whisper of dry leaves skittering across cracked stone. The houses sagged like tired bones, windows dark and unwelcoming. Even the church, once the heart of the village, was silent. The bell hadn't rung in weeks. The people I passed didn't meet my gaze, their eyes flickering away like they feared drawing attention. Their whispers stopped when I drew near. I felt it the moment I stepped off the train, a quietness that was too complete, like the world was holding its breath. On the third night, beneath the harvest moon's swollen orange glow, I found it. A mark carved deep into the bark of the oldest oak tree standing at the edge of the village square. The symbol was strange, a twisted circle, jagged lines clawing outward like roots or claws. The air around it felt heavier, like the warmth sucked out of the night. That night, I heard something else. A song, but not one sung by human lips. It was woven into the wind itself, curling and twisting through the branches. A melody that felt older than me, older than the village, older than the very trees. It whispered through my mind, wrapping around my thoughts like cold fingers. I couldn't resist. I followed the sound, stepping through the tall, swaying grass that brushed my knees and tangled around my boots. The air grew colder, thicker with each step, until I stood at the edge of the forest, where shadows moved in unnatural ways, bending and folding into themselves. There, beneath the harvest moon, they waited. Figures draped in bark and leaves, their faces hidden behind masks woven from gnarled roots and moss, their eyes glinting with something wild and old. They moved without sound, gliding through the trees like they were part of the forest's breath. The largest among them stepped forward, slowly lowering its mask to reveal eyes glowing like embers beneath cracked bark. "You returned," it said, voice like dry leaves rustling in a forgotten autumn. I wanted to run, but my feet were frozen. The voice continued, slow and steady. "The harvest moon watches all. It remembers the promises made in blood and shadow. You come because the debt is called due. I remembered the stories whispered to me as a child. The old pacts my ancestors made with the forest. Sacrifices to keep the crops growing, to keep the village safe from hunger and ruin. Those promises had been buried under years of disbelief and silence, but the past never truly dies. The figure reached out a hand, rough and bark-like, and touched my chest. A cold spread through me, sharp and bitter like the first frost of winter, sinking deep into my bones. "You carry the price," it said. Suddenly roots burst from the ground, twisting and writhing like snakes. They coiled around my ankles, pulling me down. I struggled, but the forest was relentless. The figures closed in, their song rising, a chorus of voices not quite human, harmonizing in a dreadful lullaby that echoed between the trees. Then everything stopped. Silence fell like a heavy cloak, suffocating and complete. When I woke, I was lying beneath the old oak tree, the carved symbol still fresh and bleeding sap on its bark. But the village was gone. The houses, the fields, the streets, all swallowed by the forest, replaced by endless trees stretching into a sky drained of color. The harvest moon was gone too, swallowed by a pale, empty sky that offered no comfort. I don't know what I am now, cursed, chosen, or simply forgotten. But sometimes, when the wind stirs the branches just right, I hear that song again, faint and haunting, beneath the rustle of leaves. The debt is not paid. It waits. And so do they. They say the tide in Calder's Rest never quite recedes the same way twice. Sometimes it goes out so far, you can walk the seabed past the last reef, where black rocks rise like broken teeth. Other days it barely leaves the shore, as though something's holding it close. But always, without fail, it returns by dusk, and with it, the sea brings things. Not shells, not driftwood, things with edges. I came here after the job in Leeds fell through. My uncle had died, some accident they said, and left me the cottage he kept by the cliff. A single room, slanted roof. There was still tea in the kettle, moldy and cold. I didn't plan to stay long, but the people here didn't mind. They just nodded and kept to themselves. Quiet, weather-worn types. The kind of folks who looked like they'd been carved out of whatever the sea spat up 100 years ago. It was on my third night that I noticed the marks. Each door in the village, every single one, had a notch carved into the lintel. Not random, deliberate. 9 slashes. 8 clean. The 9th split wider and deeper, as though something had caught mid-carve. I checked my door. Nothing. That night I woke to the sound of water dripping onto stone, though there hadn't been rain in days. On the 5th day, someone knocked. A girl, maybe 16, barefoot in a wool coat too big for her. Her voice was calm, rehearsed. "You haven't marked. You need to mark before low water," she said. When I asked what she meant, she only pointed at the horizon. The tide was going out, faster than I'd ever seen. The bay looked like it had been drained. The ones that don't mark get hurt. Then she walked away. I thought she was joking, or mad. But I marked the door anyway, 9 slashes like the others. The knife caught on the last one. I bled, just a little. That night, I dreamed of steps beneath the sand. Not ruins, not rocks, steps, worn smooth and spiraling down into dark water that didn't move. I heard something breathing in the dark, measured, patient. I woke with wet sand under my fingernails. I tried to ask the locals. At the fishmonger's, a woman placed a wrapped parcel into my hand without speaking. Inside, a dead eel, jaw unhinged. Eyes, milk white. In its mouth, rolled tight in salt cloth, was a note. Don't follow the low water. Don't listen when it calls your name. The following day, the sea didn't return. The tide rolled out in the morning and kept going, past the shelf, past the reefs, past the horizon. You could walk for miles now on seabed that hadn't seen sun in centuries. The air smelled like rusted teeth. The gulls circled, but wouldn't land. The villagers locked their doors. Some stood on their porches, eyes shut, whispering. Others lit black candles and poured seawater over their thresholds. I didn't understand. Then there was a sound, not from the sea, but from beneath. A low, hollow bang, like something large tapping from the underside of the world. 9 times. The girl returned, staring at the mark on my door. She nodded once. If it thinks you're not part of the count, it'll want to fill the gap. She handed me a length of rope, knotted at the ends. You tie this to your bed. If you hear the tide, don't open your eyes. That night, I tied the rope. I did not sleep. I heard the water rise outside. No waves, just a slow, climbing presence, like the sea had come to look at me. It lapped against the windows but didn't break in. Then something knocked. Not at the door. From under the floor. 3 knocks, then a pause. Then 6 more. I didn't move. I didn't open my eyes. When dawn came, the tide was back. The door was wet. There were footprints on the inside of the windows. Not human. I went to the village square. The locals were burning rope, pouring sand from their boots. The girl approached. You've been counted now. I asked what that meant. She didn't answer, just pointed at my arm. There, beneath the skin of my forearm, just faintly raised, were 9 tiny slashes. The 9th one still bleeding.